Hi all, welcome back to AtroKraft. Today we're kicking off a brand new Factorio series where we'll be playing through the Space Age DLC and using a combination of Train World, Deathworld, and Marathon settings. This will be a vanilla-ish playthrough, mostly standard gameplay with a few quality of life mods and maybe one or two light gameplay tweaks. No overhaul mods, nothing that significantly changes the tech tree, and nothing that'll make the game unrecognizable to a casual Factorio player, assuming such a person even exists. Before we drop into the map and start getting eaten alive by biters, let's take a quick look at the mod list so you know exactly what's different. And feel free to copy this setup if you want to play along with a similar world. Okay, I'm just going to read down this list alphabetically. The first mod is AAI Containers and Warehouses. This is one of the mods that's going to affect gameplay in a small way. It adds a handful of new chest types. I like having a lot of storage available, and the vanilla chests just aren't enough when you're trying to keep production running while also expanding outward and gathering new resources, especially in a world absolutely packed with top-tier biters. The second mod on this list is Afraid of the Dark. I've actually never played with this one before, but I do know from experience that nighttime in Factorio is a total nightmare when you're trying to cut footage together for YouTube. Everything looks pitch black and muddy. Half the time you can't even tell what you're placing down, and neither can the viewer. So we're going to give this a try and see if it helps brighten things up. If nothing else, it should make the early game a little less visually painful. The third mod is Auto Deconstruct, which is exactly what it sounds like. When a mining drill or pump jack runs out of resources, this mod automatically flags it for destruction. It cleans up all those little red X's cluttering your ore patches and makes it a lot easier to see when a resource field is starting to shrink. Technically this does affect gameplay, but I don't really consider it a game-changing mod. It's more of a quality of life than anything else. It keeps things clean without adding any power or upgrades. Next up is Bob's Adjustable Inserters. This one definitely changes gameplay because it lets you modify exactly which tiles an inserter can pick up from and place to, up to an unlockable 24 different positions. It opens the door to build configurations that are simply impossible in vanilla. Now, if any mod on this list could be considered a cheat, it would be this one, so I won't blame you if you prefer not to use it, but for me the extra flexibility is absolutely worth it. We're also using Bottleneck Light, which is a purely quality of life mod. It adds a small colored indicator above the machines to show their current status. Green, yellow, and red, just like the status poles in Satisfactory. It completely removes the guesswork of figuring out which machine is starved, blocked, or running smoothly. It doesn't change balance or mechanics, it just makes troubleshooting much easier. The next few entries on this list are just dependency mods and one that manages my test environment, so those aren't really worth covering here. The next one that actually matters is Hellmod. Hellmod is a factory design powerhouse. It lets you do all your production math right inside the game without tabbing out to a spreadsheet. Ratios, ingredient chains, production blocks, throughput requirements, all of it, instantly. Everyone needs this mod. Just get it and thank me later. Next up is Nanobots, which act as an early game version of construction and deconstruction robots. These absolutely affect gameplay because they let you start placing blueprints long before you have legit drones up and running. You could argue that it's a bit of a cheat, but honestly it mostly removes some early game pain and then quietly fades into irrelevance once real bots come online. So in the grand scheme, it's actually less of a cheat than the Adjustable Inserters mod, which remains powerful all game long. We're down to the last few mods now, and next up is Nixie Tubes. These give you alphanumeric displays that can show real-time data pulled directly from the circuit network. They look great, they're super readable, and we're going to be doing some really cool things with them later on in the playthrough. Right alongside Nixie Tubes is text plates, which lets us place actual text labels directly in the world. Perfect for marking districts, labeling rail lines, identifying factory blocks, all the stuff Factorio desperately needs in vanilla. When combined with Nixie Tubes, this gives us a ton of visual communication options for the megabase. Finally, we're using Squeak Through. one of the most essential quality of life mods ever made. It lets you slip between pipes, solar panels, machines, and all the tight spaces that vanilla Factorio insists that you should body check instead. It doesn't change the balance at all, but it makes dense builds so much less irritating to walk through. Massive quality of life upgrade. Alright, so that's the full list of mods installed. And for me, these are pretty much the bare minimum for a fresh Factorio playthrough. Quality of life improvements, a few light gameplay tweaks, and tools that make the whole experience smoother without changing the identity of the game. Okay, now let's move on to the game settings. What I'm going to do here is paste in the map exchange string that I pre-prepared for this video. It includes both the map seed and every game setting that we'll be using. I have this string saved, and if you want it, just reach out and I'll get it over to you. Okay, starting with the resource page. These all follow the standard train world pattern. All non-novice settings stay at their default, but on novice itself we push the frequency way down and the size way up. I also increase richness a bit to give us more time before we need to hunt for new resources. With those Deathworld biters breathing down our neck, a little buffer is going to go a long way. Next up is terrain. This page stays mostly unchanged except for the cliffs, which I've reduced slightly in both frequency and size. Cliffs only add chaos to early game layouts, and that's not what we're going for here. I didn't remove them completely, just soften them so the world feels more buildable without flattening it entirely. Now the enemy settings. This is where the Deathworld rules come in. Enemy frequency is up, enemy size is up, and the evolution time factor is way up. So we're dealing with more biters who evolve faster. To keep things from being impossible right out of the gate, I also bumped up the starting area so we have a little breathing room before the first waves hit. We'll have more to say on the consequences of these decisions later. And finally, the advanced page. The tech cost multiplier is set to 4 here, which will slow our research progress dramatically. That's the marathon component kicking in. A few pollution settings are tweaked as well. Trees absorb less of it, and the smog spreads a bit faster. Biters will attack with less pollution buildup than usual, and when you combine that with the fast evolution, you can see why this is going to get challenging fast. Alright, well, with all of that set and without any more delays, let's get into the game. So, just like every factory game ever, the story is exactly the same. We've crash landed on an alien planet and the only way off is to build enough industry to escape. The early game is all about getting the basics online, so we're going to start by placing a few burner miners to begin digging up resources. The first miners feed directly into stone furnaces, and for now we'll be refueling them manually. It's slow and a little painful, but that's the Factorio experience. The coal miners are the one exception. They can feed into each other and will self-fuel once they get going. Everything else needs manual feeding until we automate it. The next immediate priority is power. Early power in Factorio is extremely straightforward. The boiler to steam ratio is always 1 boiler to 2 engines, so there's not much room for variation here. We'll run a water line, feed the boilers with coal, hook up the engines, and just like that we got our first bit of electricity online. Once we do have power, we can finally start researching. The first few technologies can only be completed with handcrafted science packs, so we'll knock those out quickly. As soon as we unlock assemblers though, we'll automate part of the science process. Nothing fancy yet, just enough to keep red science coming in while we focus on expanding the base. And expanding is exactly what we're going to be doing next. With power and early science online, it's time to set up our first permanent smelting block. We'll start producing a proper smelting array sized to handle 1 full belt of material. This will give us a clean, scalable backbone for the early game, and it future-proofs the design so we don't have to rebuild it later. When we do upgrade to steel furnaces, the ratios will stay the same. All we need to do is upgrade the belts to red and everything continues to work at full throughput. If you're curious about the numbers, 48 furnaces will fully saturate 1 transport belt. That's the magic number we'll be working with here. With our initial infrastructure in place, we go ahead and lay out the entire smelting row. It's going to be 2 blocks of iron plate, 1 of steel, 2 of copper plate, and 1 of stone brick. This lineup will carry us comfortably all the way to trains, and maybe even into early bots. But realistically, with this playthrough settings, we're probably going to start the rail network a bit earlier than usual. Next, I set up a dedicated assembler to start producing ammo. Spoiler, this is going to be wildly inadequate for what's coming, but we'll get into that later. Around this time, we also unlock electric mining drills, so we start placing those in preparation for the full smelting block coming online. And this is right about the moment where the biter incursion begins. Our pollution cloud is expanding. Building in the desert was a mistake, as there are almost no trees here to soak up the pollution. The cloud is growing much faster and reaching farther than we would like. We find a smaller biter nest inside the pollution radius and just barely manage to clean it out. The larger ones, though, are completely off the table until we get more military upgrades and better equipment. The next priority is getting green circuits online. We design a small plant sized for 2 yellow belts of production, enough to future-proof things a little bit once the smelting facility eventually upgrades. And now the biter attacks are starting to ramp up. We build a wall around the smelting facility and line it with gun turrets. A sharp-eyed viewer probably sees exactly where this is going, but I haven't realized it yet in the moment. With our science requirements growing, the next step is to build a more permanent science factory. We place down the blueprint and start setting machines, but at this point most of our time is spent firefighting. It's just crisis after crisis as biters tear into the base from every direction. And after almost 2 straight hours of this, I'm sorry to say that I quit. Or well, maybe quit isn't the right word. It was more like I succumbed to the futility of it all. I didn't try to chew through my keyboard or anything, but it was clear that there was no point in continuing. The pollution cloud was simply too big, too fast, and the base was nowhere near defensible. This plan was not it. So, after this and yet another failed attempt, I finally did some reading on the topic. I learned the actual early game strategy for surviving Deathworld, and it's pretty much the opposite of everything that I did. The trick is to keep your production as small as humanly possible until all the early game techs are unlocked. That means your pollution footprint is tiny, which means fewer attacks and slower biter evolution. Then, once you have a real defensive perimeter, red ammo unlocked, and the surrounding nest cleared, then you're allowed to expand your industrial footprint, but only then. So, it's back to the new game screen we go. We keep almost all the same settings, but this time I return the starting area to normal, because the bigger buffer strategy clearly failed, and partially as a penance for the first disaster. I also hit the random seed button until I found a map with a healthy amount of trees and a terrain layout that actually looks defensible. This process was slow and honestly pretty boring, so I did it off stream. There wasn't much to show anyway, just 4 tiny iron smelters, 1 copper smelter, constantly crafting ammo and walls, and constantly feeding 2 labs until I finally hit green science and unlocked red ammo. All while I was clearing as many biter nests as possible. It all leads to this: a small walled-in area, a tiny pollution footprint, and no biters in the immediate vicinity. For the first time in this entire playthrough, we can actually start expanding for real. And that's where we're going to call it for today. It was more growing pains than progress, but we'll make up for that in the next episode. Until then, leave a like, drop a comment, and most importantly, hit that subscribe button for more factory content. And thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.